All right, good morning, everybody. We have John from Port Orange, Nanette from warm and tropical Connecticut, where it is, I'm going to guess, below 50. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. AJ, I think, is in Wisconsin. No. Minnesota? Minnesota, where it is, you don't have a temperature in Minnesota. If I remember correctly, it's like below the thermometer. Is that correct? AJ, can you unmute for a minute? I can't hear you, AJ. You didn't.
We're both in Minnesota.
Okay, what is it?
And it's 4 degrees.
That means you've been cursed. What is it
Up
like?
from 1.
Up from 1. Godfrey. Nanette, what is it like in Connecticut?
It's a balmy 25.
Oh, we've gone from 1 to 4, 25. This is just lovely. All right,
And we
moving
have
along
more
here.
snow coming.
All right, Doug is in Munich. Ray, we've got Ray and Roy today. Ron was with us. I don't know what happened to him. Ray is in Washington Heights, New York. Holly, again, is up in Wisconsin. Roy is out in Bellingham. Maureen, now look, Maureen, can you unmute for a minute?
Yes.
Okay, Maureen. Now look, if they take your hand off by mistake, we've never
Oh,
had a
don't-
relic. Now listen to me, we've never had a relic. Liberals don't do relics, so we would be more than glad to accept your hand if there's a mistake as a relic. Does that bother you?
Well, no, you can have the arthritic cyst that they're going to remove from my finger if you'd like. Hopefully the joint remains intact.
No,
but-
no, this is no good. We want the finger of the hand. That's fine. Are you getting my surgeon to do it?
No, I'm getting my surgeon. I'm going to an actual hand surgeon because it involves the joint. There's
Okay.
been like the arthritis in the joint has like pushed through, like there's
Oh.
been an opening. The inflammation is so great that the joint has opened and inflammation is coming out and forming a pustule. I know it's a little disgusting.
But we wish you well. And
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'll check in with you at the end of the week, okay?
Thank you.
Okay. Pat is with us from balmy New York, where there is icicles, I'm guessing, still on the balcony. Mary Grimmy is from Tampa. Danny is from New York, Forest Hills. Pat, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
We don't see you today. What happened?
I'm feeling camera shy today.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. And we've got Barbara Young as well from South Miami and in the famous Shrimp, age 20, who was born on November 3rd. All right. Okay. Yes, AJ.
Holly and I are both in Minnesota at 4 degrees. We're
4
just in
degrees.
two locations in the house.
Oh, okay. That's good. All right. All right. So here we go. Let me begin by going back to, we left our interesting group of people in Canaan, and just a quick recap, who look at the land, and the land is already a complex piece of property. To the north, we have the ancient Phoenicians and the residuals of their culture. Along the coast, we have groups of people who've moved in from the Mediterranean and lived along the coast, and ultimately these will be known as Philistines. In 5 major cities along the coast, the cities are independent, but they operate in a Phoenician way of doing much trading. The trading makes them wealthy, independent city-states, and they can afford very, very well-armed mercenaries. To the east of them is the ancient land of Canaan, made up of various individual tribes. And into this group will merge over a period of time semi-nomads. Semi-nomads from Arabia, semi-nomads from what we now call Iraq, and refugees that escape in small groups from Egypt, slaves and others who will escape. And so you've got three different groups moving in and settling in, and then ultimately intermarrying and interbreeding and merging into a culture that had El as the head god, Baal as his son, and either Astarte as his either consort or daughter, depending upon what mythology you use. Ultimately, this will result in a land called El, Israel, which means originally let El rule. Interestingly enough, the group from Arabia, from the Midianite mountains of northwestern Arabia, have a god called Yah. And they will bring their god with them, according to the theory. And as they begin to settle in, people ask very simply, what is your God? And they say Yah, and how does your God behave? And people found that the god Yah behaved not much differently than the god El. And so over a period of time, you have then a mingling and co-merging of theologies and cultures and peoples. Ultimately, this will result in 11 groups that will intermarry, intermerge, and they'll be from the original land of Canaan. The land of Dan is different. The tribe of Dan is much, much different, and we'll get to that in a little while. There will be, because of encroachment of Philistines and general chaos and uncooperation, ultimately the groups do not work well together, especially when they're being invaded and encroached upon by the Philistines from the west. Much to their disappointment, they decide they have to have a king. The first king is Saul, who is a tragic figure and is much maligned as you study history. He unfortunately has to deal with tribes that said they're going to work together. They don't. He will die very tragically in a battle with the Philistines, and along with him will die his sons. Meanwhile, as Saul is trying to navigate all of this, there will be a young squirt who is very charismatic. He's from the south, from the tribe of Benjamin, he will become one of those charismatic individuals. He sings songs. He's very pleasant. He's very charismatic. He gets followers of about 50 men who follow. They rent themselves out to the Philistines as mercenaries. That's a part that the Bible mentions, and nobody likes to hear it. And so he was a mercenary himself. Ultimately, through a lot of machinations, he will become the follower, the king that succeeds Saul. There is a lot written about the magnificent King David, the magnificent Jerusalem. In fact, Jerusalem is a very small village, a super village of about 5 acres on the side of a hill that may have 5,000 people in it, according to archaeology. It is not this enormous city that people remember in the exile. It is a place in the central parts of Canaan, southern central parts of Canaan. His kingdom may consist of 200 to 250 small villages. And that's what archaeology tells us, not what the Bible did, what archaeology tells us. The overwhelming identity and DNA is Canaanite, with, I said, merging groups from Iraq, we can now call Iraq, the northwest mountains of Arabia, and refugees from Egypt and the slaves of Egypt. David dies. His son Solomon takes over, he dies, and then it all goes south. The 10 groups in the north divide and become quite a prosperous and good-sized piece of area in that time. The 2 little tribes of Benjamin and Judah are in the south. The one thing they have going for them is to the west, they share with the Philistines a valley of which there is many, many olives and money to be made, and they have the city of Jerusalem. And that's about it, honestly. As it happens, the Assyrians will come along and invade the north and deport tons of people that are important, some 20,000 according to the Bible, 22,000. They will go east, and they will bring people from the east into the land of Canaan, into the 10 tribes. This will result in commingling of cultures, commingling of religion, and ultimately will give rise to the group we call Samaritans. These people are all much maligned by traditionalists, which I find personally offensive. Why? Because you've got people who are left, people are brought in, neither group is trying to do anything but survive. That's what they're trying to do to survive. You are what you are. People come in, you don't know them, they don't know you, and finally you intermarry, you swap stories, you swap mythologies, you swap, and you make do the best you can. And they survive. In the South, which has now made itself a pure center of what it was originally all about, a really distortion of history, but that's what they're free to do. And they will do everything they can to survive. And finally, in the 500s, 596, the Assyrians have come and gone, the Babylonians, they agree with the Egyptians to rebel against Babylon and maintain their identity. It goes very badly. The Babylonians arrive and the major movers are deported to Babylon. 10 years later, in 586, they are suggested to rebel again with the Egyptians. This time it goes worse than badly. The Babylonians arrive, absolutely destroy the city of Jerusalem and wipe out the temple, the famous Temple of Solomon. Again, a major group are deported, and what you have left are some peasants. So this leaves us now in Babylon with anywhere from 10 to 15,000 people who were movers, shakers, and the phrase today would be influencers from what was left of refugees from the Northern Kingdom, people from the Southern Kingdom, and they're all there, and two groups will emerge in trying to recapture the history of who we were, and what we are now. One group will base its ideas on some scrolls taken with them from the temple from the time of Josiah. These are a group of scribes and Pharisees and others who are trying to recapture a history as they see it. Another group is a group that you're going to find in every religion, the priestly type. This is a group of people who believe that there are certain ways and rituals that have to be done. And every group in every religion has this group. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know if any of you have ever been to a DMV, Division of Motor Vehicles. And you know this is proof that if there is a God, God plants aggravation in our midst as temptation. I don't care what state you go into, DMVs are all the same. And they seem to be populated by the same type of person. Did you ever notice that? Think about that. Bureaucracies attract the same type of personality. And I'm noticing certain professions attract the same type of personality. Now, I say this generally, so don't anybody go ready to throw things at me. You take a look at, for instance, accountants. Most accountants tend to be very much numbers types. Underpaid, undervalued civil servants who are jaded, absolutely. And you get accountants. Most accountants are very much numbers types. They're not involved in people's skills. That's not their thing. They're numbers. They make numbers work or not work. You get exceptions to that. My wife is an accountant, and she does something that's very unique. She's very caring, and just actually very caring and very loving. And so she gets swamped with people who want her as an accountant because she basically becomes a counselor as well. And so she listens to people because they're talking about money and what money does and doesn't do and what lack of money does. And so she hears, and she's very, rather than saying, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that, she listens. So she becomes an accountant/therapist and does extraordinarily well. This has not been good because she's retired, and she gets bombed with people requesting that even though you're retired, would you? And she's had to learn to do that terrible thing, say no. But basically, accountants attract a certain type, the DMV attract, and priestly types attract a certain type of person. That's just an observation. I may be wrong, but it's just an observation. And all religions have people that are drawn to priestly types, and all religions have people that are drawn to people who are anti-priestly types. And it would be nice to find a middle. Now, in terms of my own journey, just let me say that I grew up in a very, 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 well, on the island I grew up, there was only one Protestant. Roy, I'll get to that in a minute. Just let me we'll get to the definitions in a moment. Just hold on a minute. I grew up on an island that only had one Protestant church. And what the Protestants did, they asked anybody that would build them the building they would affiliate with. And at that particular time, the only group that would offer to build a building were the Presbyterians. And the Presbyterians in this case, oddly enough, were very liberal for that part of New Jersey, which was strange. In the real world, they were moderate, but in that area, it was very liberal. But the service was very, 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 very plain. The building was very plain, white, plain windows, and it was understood that's the way it was done. Communion service was once a month, and it was very quiet and very austere. It was like a low church holy mystery. There was no chanting, no vestments, no anything else, except the black robe and the white bands, but it was very quiet, and you didn't dare make any noise. Very, very somber, quiet organ music as people took communion in the pews as it was passed out. And this is what I thought. And then I found out that didn't work for me. It was too plain. But then I get to seminary and I find out there are others who are very much into it. Episcopalians called ceremonial. All kinds of vestments, all kinds of the way you hold your hands, all the kind of way you make the cross. There are ways that have to be done. And I got overwhelmed by that. And I kept on finding that my whole career has been a way of trying to find a middle. How do you have a sense of love of ritual, but not getting carried away with the ways in which it's done, the things you wear in what's called ceremonial? And not also, I ran into the fact that when you do rituals, it seems to be automatically understood there's an orthodox theology that must inform the ritual. I kept on saying, why? Why can't you have rituals when unorthodox liturgy? So I find myself even more on the outside. People who are very liberal like I am theologically don't like rituals. People who like rituals don't like liberal theology. And I kept running into that. So you get All Souls, which is for Unitarians, very high church. It has a service of word and sacrament. And there's a lot of reading. There's a lot of response. It's not the old Puritan service, which most Unitarian churches have. If you really want to look at Unitarians today, they basically take the Book of Common Prayer service, strip it of chants, and you add a offering, hymn, sermon, hymn at the end, which is what morning prayer is in the Episcopal Church for low churches. And that's basically Unitarian worship. We came along and we said, why don't we use worship rather than sitting and being passive? You are active. Congregations respond, they read, there is more music, there is more, and you have a communion meal that is not all kinds of orthodoxy and holy mysteries, but you do it the way Jesus did it, bread and cup and fellowship. So that puts us as total outliers, kind of a middle way. How do you have some ritual, but without going nuts about all kinds of rituals about how you do it, the way you hold your hands, things that must be worn, etc. All right. So having said this, in Judaism, you then get a group that is trying to maintain a sense of ritual. And there is a group of exiles who are priests who remember the temple in Jerusalem before it was torn down. And they absolutely insist dogmatically that you must maintain those rituals. People said there's no temple. You still must maintain rituals. And they said there will be another temple that will be built. And when that temple is built, we must have rituals in place, for there are only certain ways to be done. Now, it's not just Judaism that does this. Hinduism does this. There'll be certain rituals in Hinduism. Buddhism will have this. There are certain rituals that must be followed in Mahayana Buddhism. You're going to find this in every religion. There's going to be a group that says there are certain rituals that must follow a certain order, a certain pattern. And if you deviate from that, it's bad. It doesn't count. The ritual is aced out. Now, that brings us then to a discussion today of what we saw. Now, Roy asked, what do we mean by ritual? I would say a ritual, it is understood that certain words must be said and certain order must be preserved. You have certain things that must follow in an order. Certain words must be said. Certain patterns must be followed. It's understood that somebody is official that leads this. And usually with this comes a certain types of dress that you wear. So you'll have somebody who is officially educated, set aside, that does this. Neanderthals did this with shamans. I mean, all groups have done this. Somebody who is set aside, somebody it's understood has certain things they wear to set them that they are set aside. There are certain patterns that are followed regularly. It must follow certain patterns, certain words, certain ways the words are said, and certain things you do with your hands. And usually with many religions, there is a sense of smell involved. Incense. And usually there are certain senses of lights, candles. Now this goes back long, long before Judaism and Christianity and Islam. The idea of light overcoming darkness, the idea of incense, the idea of patterns, the idea of saying patterns, the idea of chanting, the idea of singing, the idea of somebody leading that, and there's certain ways and you cannot deviate. And that just goes to say, now the problem is, what if you're trying to find a middle way? Now, this week, we read a very, very fascinating article, which completely shocked me. I thought I had been shocked enough about rituals. And those of you who saw this, let me just read to you this. There is a priest who was saying during a baptismal ceremony, "We baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit." He has been doing this since 1995 for Lord knows how many people. And the diocese said, this is all wrong. He had to have said, "I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit." Now, in my mind, I didn't see the difference. And in my mind, I was saying, I'm sure if I'm not trying to be rude. I kept on saying, if there's a God that's that concerned about this, I need another God. I need to go God shopping. I really do, because given my personality stuff, I would not work well with this kind of God. This is not going to work for me. I am not somebody who believes personally that every I has to be dotted and every T crossed for something to be effective. Messes can be effective. Taking something, going off on a moment, doing something totally new can be effective. Putting something in a box rigidly, saying this is the only way, just my personality doesn't respond to that. And if a God believes that this is the only way things that have been done, well, obviously that God and I are not going, and I'm not trying to be rude about that. Then there is the argument, as I read further in the article, the Roman Catholic Church argues it is God and Christ alone who presides at all sacraments. And the problem I had with this automatically is Jesus didn't know anything about these sacraments. They're making Jesus, again, and I have to remember the theology, that in traditional Christianity, it will evolve that Jesus is more than a Galilean preacher and more than a rabbi, that it will evolve almost within decades after he dies. There will those who say, no, he's more than this. He has to be more than this. He therefore must be sent from God. And therefore, more than that, God has to be in him more than a special way. And then more than that, finally, he is God in the flesh. And the fourth gospel is that group that says, no, 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 it's more than what you see, you're not getting it. And then before long, as Christianity leaves geographically its Holy Land roots and its Jewish roots, it will be adopted, the Jesus story will be adopted by other cultures and other languages. All of these other cultures will not see one God. That does not make sense to them. There's too much business to be done. So you have multiple gods. And the idea of having simple bread and cup, no, 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 you need holy and divine mysteries. All of these other cultures will have holies of holies and special priests and special groups and special things that are said, and incenses and lights and certain things that are patterned and certain chants. And so that whole simple bread and cup will then be absorbed into different languages, different cultures, different theologies, and merged. And the next thing you know, by the 300s and 400s, the Jesus who was a Galilean preacher who went wearing the simple clothes he wore and was middle-aged when he started preaching, suddenly gets now transformed into God in the flesh, God of God, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, unmade, being of one substance with the Father, who for us in our salvation came down from heaven and was made incarnate by the Virgin Mary. This becomes a God that's totally foreign to Judaism and would be totally foreign to the very first Christians who followed him. I am sure that if you said to John, I say this to my classes, if you were to go back in a time machine and arrive at Capernaum, where Jesus moved after he from Nazareth to Capernaum when he was 30 years old, I said, if you were to go back and said, where's Jesus? First of all, nobody would know who you were talking about. His name was Yeshua or Yeshasha, depending on whether you're speaking Aramaic or Greek or Hebrew. Yeshua or Yeshasha. Nobody would get Jesus. That's the Greek attempt at trying to make sense of Aramaic and or Hebrew. Then you say, God of God, light of light, people have no idea what you're talking to. If you address Jesus that way and bowed down and said, my God, he would have no idea what you're talking about. And so when it says Christ and Christ alone presides at all the sacraments, I'm trying to think of what sacraments would Jesus know? And Jesus would know what? Healing, caring, loving, forgiving. That's what he knows. That's what he preached. The fact that you would have formality and things you had to do in an organized way like that just escapes an atonement. Yeah, atonement, by the way, is a fascinating thing. We should talk about that sometime, the whole doctrine of atonement. All right, moving along here. Then this is another thing that I understand where it comes from, but it's so foreign to Jesus. It says, the sacrament of baptism grants access to all others. Botched baptism can invalidate all subsequent sacraments, including marriage. Now I'm wondering, where do you get this? So that means that the diocese said virtually everybody that this priest came in contact with, everybody he baptized, then everything they've done in Catholicism after that is invalid. And I don't even know how to begin to process that. I really don't. Now, I'm not dumb. I've been around. I mean, I get that. I've been in the field. I've been in the business, the thing already. And I can't even begin to process that. And I wrote to one of our, now in All Souls, by the way, I need to remind everybody, we have Armenian Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, and Roman Catholics, along with lots of Jews, atheists, and agnostics, and a whole bunch of non-dogmatic Christians who are the Jesus, we like you from Galilee. That's it. Thank you very much. So when I get this, I'm overwhelmed, and I can't believe for the life of me that somewhere, someplace, this didn't happen before, and there is some rubric in a canon someplace that would say, if this happens, you do X, Y, and Z, and it's done with it. I'm just overwhelmed, and I'm trying to think, what would Jesus, there's an old conservative Protestant saying, what would Jesus do? What would you say to Jesus 2,000 years ago in Capernaum saying, did you know that somebody made a mistake and said we instead of I, and mean everything that's done in your name afterwards is wrong? Can you imagine Jesus even comprehending that? Now, Roy comes up and reminds us We're not the only ones. And I'm glad of Roy because he reminds us, this is, as I said, this is in all religions. Roy writes to me, writes to us the following. I don't know if you saw this. Let me read this. He writes, my wife and I are not kosher. Well, I don't know what background your wife is, Roy, but you're Jewish and Sufi. I mean, you're like me. You combine, well, like the rest of us here, we combine everything. By the way, you do know what we do here is known as technically synchronism. We take and see if we can make a pattern, a tapestry, if we can make sense of all of this and make something that makes sense to us. That is traditionally considered taboo by traditionalists in every religion. I've never understood why. It must be a threat. To me, it makes ultimate sense. If the Hindus have something to offer, fine. If the Mahayana Buddhists have something to offer, fine. I said to my students this week, Taoism. Rather than this, with all due respect, Doug, because you're in Germany, rather than this, we have thesis and we have antithesis, and this is not good. You will like the synthesis. Yeah, the synthesis. I said, Taoism suggests you chill. Things ebb and they flow. They ebb and they flow. And I said, as you're approaching things, and it seems if one thing is striking again, remember things ebb and flow. It's easier to process life and to work with life, knowing things that ebb and flow rather than this constant stuff. And so my students said, wow, that is cool. I said, it was Hinduism that were the first ones to argue, you know, you have two things in your mind and they're totally contradictory, but you get them both. I was raised, no, you can't do that. Hindus say, why not? Consistency is overrated. I would have loved to know that when I was in college. So I look at Hinduism and Taoism and Confucianism's inner and outer virtues. I look at parts of Mahayana Buddhism, and I look and say, why wouldn't somebody want to make a faith house where you get all this stuff and it kind of gives you a sense of keeping grounded? So Roy writes the following. My wife and I are not kosher. The rabbis would never eat in our house, of course. You're wrong. Reform would. Reconstruction would. Yes? Okay. There's another family. Now, I love this. These be really good. Danny said, Walt Whitman said something similar about inconsistency. Good for Walt. There's another family that's Orthodox and kosher. Every year before COVID, they'd organize a community Seder. The rabbis won't eat there either because it's not the right kind of kosher. Yes, there was a huge fight on Miami Beach about kosher and which rabbis were allowed to do. It got to be a huge fight on Miami Beach. There are over, and I learned something from Roy. I'm tired. What would I do without you people? It's like I'm having to go back to school every week. There are over 100 varieties of kosher. Each group of Jews claiming to hold the high holy days to paradise. And I got to thinking about that. Orthodox Judaism is as bad as Protestants. Which kind of Orthodox Judaism? Which area of Poland? Which area of Russia? Which area of of Germany that did not go reform? And and so it's like which area, and you get then you get things. By the way, for those of you who are not aware of this, there was a Rabbi Schneerson who died a couple of decades ago in Brooklyn. He has a fenced-in tomb. Well, it's like a cement. It's a marble thing. Did you know that his followers send prayers to him every day? And there's so many prayers sent to the rabbi to intercede for them that they had to buy a house across the street where they have a huge fax machine who give these prayers out to be dispersed to the rabbi, who's dead, by the way, so that he may intercede for those. So I'm just saying, no matter where you go, and each group insists they're right. Now, luckily for us, since there's no concept of what would be the right way, because there are too many of us, we just assume the right way is to accept there are many ways. Or we're dogmatic about being not dogmatic, if that makes sense. And we're dogmatic that there are varieties of ways you can worship and a varieties of ways you can do things, and that's perfectly fine. That does not work with lots of people. But I read something like this, and this puts me on edge because I believe rituals are important. I think there are some rituals that all of us find important. A baby's born. Is it enough to say a baby's born? Or do you want to have a ritual in which you celebrate the baby, celebrate a name of a baby, celebrate the birth of the baby, the life of the mother, the health of the family, and whatever other things you do with the birth? And most people need a ritual with a birth. Most people, when somebody dies, want a ritual, some kind of ritual where you acknowledge with others thanksgiving for knowing the person, and a ritual where you can grieve together. It's okay to grieve together and sit together and stand together. Most people need to do that. Not everybody, but most people. Most people want a ritual of welcome, a ritual of fellowship. Oh, Roy said, Roy, I missed that. I missed that. Missed that. I missed that. Schneerson, hold it. I missed that. One of the rabbis took me to Schneerson's tomb. We went into the mikveh first, took a ritual bath, which was interesting. You pay $2 for a towel and hot water. Okay, whoa, I didn't know that. That is against everything I ever knew about Judaism, but there you go. So what do I know? Obviously not much. Maureen is going to a funeral today. We do funerals. Yes, and you say, Danny's right. We have most people have some kind of ritual for occasion, births, coming of age. Yes, coming of age, weddings. Here's another thing. You would think that today the big thing with weddings is just going to the justice of the peace or the courthouse. Well, guess what? You might be surprised. Most people today still want a ceremony of some type. I get regularly the kind of phone call. Okay, Maureen went, all right, but I said most, not everybody, but most people. I get the kind of phone call all the time. It starts like this. I don't know if you've ever got a phone call like this, but I said, before you continue, let me continue for you. But you went to the courthouse, got a marriage. It was 5 minutes. It was exactly what you thought, but it's now 4 to 6 months later and you miss a ceremony. Can I still do the ceremony? And the person says, how did you know? I said, because 1/3 of all the weddings I officiate at are people who've been to the courthouse and decide 4 to 6 months later they needed something more. And it's caught you by surprise. Something was missing. And it's embarrassing to you, but you knew something inside of you was missing. I said, you go to Jung and others, it's part of our thing. Most, not everybody, but most need rituals for births, coming of age, marriages, deaths, and other rituals too. As I mentioned, the Russian Orthodox in the congregation I had before wanted blessings of houses. Sometimes you have blessings of other things you use, a prayer book, beads. Hindus have blessings of beads. Mahayana Buddhists have things set aside. I mean, everybody has blessings of different things that mean something to them. Now, the question is, how do you do those rituals in a way that doesn't put you into a box? Yeah, there are all kinds of things. Many of you are putting these things up. The point is, how do you do rituals so that they have meaning, but don't become rote and they lose their meaning? Right, and Tibetan Buddhists too, yes. What I like about Islam is that mainstream remains strong within the mainstream. Wait, I'm losing these chats. Hold on, let me see if I can pull up the chat. About Islam is that mainstream remains within the mainstream. The emphasis is on intention. One's intention is more important than getting every detail right. And I would say that, Roy, about liberal religion as well, in any religion, is it the intention that counts? What if you get somebody who has, and I was thinking of a minister I know, what if you have somebody who has some disability and they're not able to get all the words right? It's the intention that counts. What if you have somebody whose heart is in the right place and they can't get all the words exactly right, or they can't hold something exactly right? You're right, the intention. I missed something that Danny said. What did Daniel say? I missed something that Danny, let me pull that up here. Let's see, what do we have? My best friend was married by a Unitarian minister after they decided they wanted something more than a city. So he was Russian Orthodox and was Jewish. She sent for the Unitarians. How do you then appreciate the role of a ritual, but then have an intentionality that is able to bring people together in a meaningful way? Now, I've done a lot of weddings with Catholics and Muslims from Iran. These are people who came over and they're second or third generation Iranians. Their family still what I would call secular Islam. They still have ties to Islam emotionally. They don't belong to a mosque, but they still have very strong ties to their background and their homeland. You get somebody who's not an active Roman Catholic, but still has certain things that they want said in a ceremony. A reading from Paul: love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, love never ends. It's odd that Paul would write that. He's the last person in the world that I would ever think could write a love poem like that. If there's ever an example that somebody isn't speaking, somebody's speaking through them, that is it. So I would get this often. And so I would look to Rumi and look to Christian love poetry and build on the best of both. And it seems to me there needs to be communities that can look at all kinds of things to pull together to make something wholesome and intentionally good. And so I realize there are those within religion who have to have something that is this, this, and this, said a certain way. It must be done a certain way. I realize in religions there are those who want none of that. It's a free-for-all, whatever you want, whenever you want, that's fine. Somehow there's got to be a middle ground, a middle way, where intentionality counts. The words make sense as best as you're able to pull things together with intentionality. And I would like to suggest that is what basically you and I stand for. A way of pulling words together, wisdom together from different traditions that enlighten and ennoble us. And if we get the words not exactly right, who cares? It's the intention. I think that's absolutely right. And which words? There are so many good words. I'm thinking of one of the things I tell my students. I said, if you want some immediate help for looking at grief, look at this poem from Rumi: sorrow prepares you for joy. That is one of the most important poems and ideas I've ever seen on dealing with grief. It gives a whole different way of looking for grief. I look at other things as well. So I'm trying to say, if you can find words that the intention is, how do we remain healthy mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? And if you get the words wrong, now I was looking at the words that this priest used, we versus I, and I cannot for the life of me imagine what was wrong with that. Now, I read what the church said, but I still couldn't process it. I mean, I'm not dumb. I read it and read it and read it. I just couldn't get it. So my take on all of this is that we continue, at least our group, to accept that most of us need rituals at some points in our life. The question is then, how can we put together rituals that are intentionally helpful, that include, not exclude, and pull us together emotionally, mentally, religiously, faithfully, in a way that makes sense? There was a funeral service that is still I hear about, where a clergyman got up and said, the service now continues, but with no isms. We don't want anybody up here of any ism, no Buddhism, no Hinduism, no Protestantism, no Judaism, no isms. This church is, I won't mention the name, and that's all that are welcome here at this point. And I'm thinking, okay, that church has the right to say that. And other groups say that all the time religiously. I would argue that there has to be a counterbalance to that. A counterbalance to that. And so I would argue that yes, we are and can be a type of counterbalance where we can include Sufi, Mahayana, the words of Jesus, absolutely fascinating comments by Paul when they appear. We can look at some ideas from Hinduism and all the great religions and learn as well. And I like being poked by atheists who remind us not to take ourselves so seriously. That to me is absolutely fascinating. We need that. I was asked by my students to describe your faith. And I said, I'll do that after the class is over because I don't want to get caught with this. And so I described it as a very simple thing. My house has a foundation of Jesus's teachings, not teachings about him. I said, I have a Hindu living room, a Taoist garden, a Jewish library, an atheist atrium, a Sufi prayer room. And they said, that's your house? I said, you get how a house does all of that. I said, you can all have different foundations, but you give yourself rooms and atriums to move in and out of as you go in and out of different aspects of your life and aspects of your day. Now that is considered very, very bad by traditionalists in all religions. It's called syncretism. To me, it sounds great and healthy, but that's just what I offer today. I was very sad to read that today because it makes all rituals look bad. And I feel sorry for all those people who are absolutely scared that everything that they did now doesn't have any meaning. And I feel pastorally very bad for them. So I'm glad we could see everybody today. The weather is, yeah, Doug reminds us, yeah, in Germany, and by the way, all throughout Europe, you go to a courthouse for marriage and for a wedding, for marriages to be legalized. Then you go to a house of worship for a ceremony.
No, not in Finland. We got married in Finland and the church wedding was recognized.
Oh, really?
Yes.
In Finland?
That's not the reason we went to Finland. That was, of course, Tea's hometown church, etc. But no, we didn't have to do it twice.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Okay, you taught me something.
Was it a Lutheran church in Finland?
Originally, it was a Catholic church. Then came the Reformation. It became Lutheran. And yes, it is Lutheran. And we actually had a Lutheran pastor as well as a Catholic priest doing the ceremony, just to make sure it was valid, that I had no way out.
Oh, that's nice.
By the way, the things of validity, I'll just share this with you because it's kind of fun because Doug gets this. I was baptized Roman Catholic because my mother married a Roman Catholic, and he, after the divorce, left the church, and she really, well, anyway. So I went to, I was in Rochester, New York, and I went to Blessed Sacrament Roman Catholic Church, and I said, I'm just curious, do you have my baptismal certificate? And they looked it up, and they did. And they said, we take it you are a good Catholic. And I said, no, I'm not. I'm in fact a Protestant minister. And they said, it's not too late. You can come back to the true church. And I smiled and I said, that was very, very kind of you. I deeply appreciate that. But I am convinced there are lots of churches and families and groups that are equally as good and kind in the eyes of God. And that did not go over well. So I left very quietly and quickly. So I wish you all a warmer day. And I cannot thank you enough for the ways you teach me all the time. I don't know if you realized, I feel absolutely blessed by that. And I feel spoiled rotten. Every time we meet, I learn something. And I think that is really cool. The way this is like kind of a clearinghouse of learning new things from each other. Do you realize how rare that is today, where you could actually learn from different groups of different people all the time? I mean, you gather every week, we learn something from one another. And I think that is so cool. Well, all right, be safe and well. And I will record this. I'll finish recording it, and be safe, and we'll see you all soon. I don't know what happened to Ron. He was here today, but there's Pat. All right. I don't know where Ron is. If somebody can, Doug, if you can find out what happened to him, tell him we missed him. We got John and Annette and AJ and Holly and Dan and Roy and Ray and Mary and Maureen and Doug and Barbara and Shrimp. Whoever's watching this, they're going to wonder who is Shrimp. And Serge Cruz, wherever he may be. All right, bye-bye and blessings to you all. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Everyone be well.
Bye.
We'll be thinking of
Bye-bye.
you,
Bye-bye, be
Maureen.
well, everyone.
We'll be thinking of you, Maureen. I'll be
Thank
checking
you.
in with you.
Thank you.
And sending healing thoughts and energy in your
Yes.
direction.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Big hugs. I'll call. I know you won't pick up the phone, but I will text you.
Okay.
All right.